Okay, while people are still getting inside, let me start with some general words about stuff. So, everybody knows what a navel is, right? That's a navel. Okay? So, kind of when you publish stuff about publishing, that's a bit of the gazing into your navel and picking stuff. So, when you tell people that you write stuff about publishing, the first things that they say is that economists love navel gazing. And when you actually submit papers to journals, turns out that editors don't like it as much. But apparently newspapers love that. So I had 2 interviews with Times Higher Education in my 5 years career, and one of them was about the paper in that field, and another one was about grades in American universities. So I guess the reason why I picked this topic as an overview talk for you guys is because I wanted to show you how to come up with ideas for your own papers. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about how the publishing process works simultaneously. So most of you have an idea because I had this yellow book thing, and each of you had a couple of pages in there that was about the thing that you wanted to do. Some of you have more than one idea. Some of you even have them printed up. Some of you even brought them to me printed out and asked me for suggestions, which is a very good practice. There are people who are in a different village who came to me with their ideas and wanted to talk to me at night. So there is a different level of motivation. This school is for those who just start developing their own ideas. This publication process is not a fundamentally big, economically important area of GDP. If you calculate the total expenditure of the world on journals and editors and referees and authors, it's not going to be anywhere significant. But there are economic interactions. I'm going to tell you now about the process of publication, and you will be able to see the abundance of these interactions. So at first, there are authors. This is the only block that doesn't have any arrows coming into it, because then I would need something that would be like the source of the idea, and that's yeah, people disagree about that. So for me, they come from showers. So I'm waking up in the morning and going to shower, and I have an idea. So people get an idea, they go to their computer, they start typing up. I like to write out stuff on the piece of paper before typing up into the computer. I like having, if I do a theoretical model, I have a collection of formulas. Then I write out a little bit of description about what do I mean by these formulas, and I send them to my advisor. My advisor says it's complete garbage. I'm putting that in the trash. My advisor said it's might be not a garbage, then I'm not always put in the trash. So you have this, it's a very useful vehicle to have a sort of typed up version of whatever is the current state of your paper, so that you don't forget what you had in mind when you... I have a paper which I didn't touch for 2 years. Because I kept everything as a typed up version, I took it out, I submitted it to European Economic Association, I got accepted, a bunch of other people got rejected, so it was a good idea. But if I didn't type it up, I would not remember it. So there is this working paper that might be just on your computer. If it's readable, you can put it on the repository. There are a number of repositories stored. There is archive.org, there is Ideas, there is RePack, there is ResearchGate, there is Academia.edu. They are spamming you all the time about put more research in here, comment on other people's research, yada yada. Point being, there is about a year, 2 years, 3 years, 4 years period when it's just a draft available on your website, on the website of your university. HSE kind of wants working papers to be posted as the working paper series, and as far as I know, they count who publishes more working papers, so that matters for other people. You develop your working papers with your own reflection, with your feedback from other people whom you send your paper, with support from grants, with support from your advisors. You ask for money, they give you money, you get a raise, you develop your working paper. So there is a lot of regurgitation in here, right? Authors change, so you get new co-authors, you kick out the lazy co-authors, so this is not, you know, a constant set all the time. At some point you start hating it. Like the paper, you can't do anything without it. You are opening that in LaTeX and you're like closing it immediately. It's time to submit. Okay? Cannot improve it anymore. You already, you know. Submission goes to the journal's editor, right? And the journal's editor is pretty much the person of, you know, complete power over your submission. So he can accept it immediately. Usually people don't, unless you're from Harvard or MIT. You might get an immediate decision, right? Or your paper might be sent to referees. Referees are completely different people with their own research agenda, with their own interests, with their own time, with their own schedules. They get reports and they send them back to the editor, and the editor comes up with a decision. In my experience, I had one desk acceptance in economic letters. I had the rejection from management science where 3 referees said that the paper must be published as is, and the editor rejected it. So the editor has complete discretion over your paper's future. So yeah, editor comes up with a decision, and it can go to the literature, can get published, or it can go back to the working paper stage. So in my experience, from here to here, I have about 40% of my papers. So about 60% went into here, like out of those which I typed up. There is like ideas getting thrown immediately, but yeah, I don't really count them. Papers which went through the publication and back into the trash, I have, say, 5%. If you deem it good enough to be submittable, there's probably a journal that will eventually accept it. So if you have already a draft, it's pretty much zero cost to submit it again. So this is pretty much the dynamics, unless I'm missing something. Am I missing something?
Colleagues, send your paper around.
Feedback, support, summer schools, all sorts of stuff. That's all here. Yeah. Every arrow, you can write a paper about. And there is so much in these arrows about each segment of this arrow you can write a paper about. There are authors. Do you want a co-author? Do you want a smart co-author? Do you want a prominent co-author? Do you want a field co-author? Do you want a guy who, you know, who is opinionated as a co-author? Do you want a guy not in the field as a co-author? What amount of effort are you supposed to spend in co-authorship, and what amount of effort your friend is supposed to spend as in the co-authorship? Right? Each of these are clearly theoretical papers. Each of these could be empirical papers, right? If you are able to extract data about that.
And it's repeated fraction.
Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. So it's a complicated theoretical model, right? So you go from here to here, right? How exactly? Do you tell the editor your name? In economics, yes, you do, right? Do you have to? What will it change? How the editor will respond to your name? Well, in the perfect world, he should be, judging the paper on the merit of the paper. In the real world, the editor of AR handles about 2,000, 3,000 papers a year. He doesn't have a lot of time to read your paper. He uses other signals, such as your university affiliation, such as the quality of your language in abstract, such as whether you are a full professor or you're not a full professor. All these things, right? Again, this might be an empirical paper. If you have data about who submitted papers and how the editor responded to that. And again, you might have different editors. So for some editors, assuming that a person can read 3,000 papers in a year is implausible. So you can say he definitely doesn't read. But say Daron Acemoglu is quite a prominent, quite an effective person. He might be reading 3,000 papers. He might be writing 3,000 papers a year. I mean, so going from the editor to the referees. How many referees, if you're an editor, put on the hat of the editor. How many referees you're going to employ? You can employ 1, you can employ 5, right? But each additional referee is costly for you, not monetarily, but in terms of services. If you're a referee, would you referee for that editor? Would you referee for that paper? I don't know. So I did not deny any referee requests in my career. I had about 20, which is not a lot. Other people get more. The older they become, the more referee requests they get. If they work in popular fields, they get more referee requests. If they write a popular paper and a lot of people start to cite them, they get more referee requests. So you cannot really satisfy them at some point. So if an editor of Econometrica contacts you and says, here is a paper, can you referee that for me? Your intuition immediately tells you that you will accept that request, right? If Montenegro Journal of Economics writes you and say, referee that paper for me, right? Say, I'm teaching 160 years a semester. I can accept the referee requests and then do nothing, right? And in a year, they will contact me again saying, remember you promised us to referee that paper in a week. And I was like, yes, I remember, but I didn't. They cannot do nothing to me, right? So the editor knows that. So he starts thinking, whom am I going to contact? Am I going to contact somebody prominent? Am I going to contact somebody in the field? Am I going to contact a PhD student? Right? And again, this is a repeated interaction. So these referees for your paper are the authors for their own paper. Right? They will be writing to the same editor with their papers. If they will be dismissive of this editor, and then they will send their own papers to the same editor. Right? How will this editor react? Now, let's say editor has a cost, like an opportunity cost of contacting a referee. How many referees is he going to employ? Let's say he got a paper from Daron Acemoglu. How many referees will he employ? Okay? No signal from no referee will discourage editor from accepting a paper from Daron Acemoglu. In fact, Konstantin Sonin was mentioning a paper by Daron Acemoglu from QGE, which Sonin rejected, and wrote to Daron saying that this is not how you identify, Jews. There was a paper about Jews where they were living in one side of the river or another side of the river or something, and he was saying that that's not an independent instrument. So it was still accepted to QGE, and it has a footnote that says, thank you very much, Konstantin Sonin, for your wonderful suggestions, but I'm not going to do anything about it. I mean, there are plenty of anecdotes about stuff. Point being, my biggest amount of referee reports was 4. I know a person with 7 referee reports in one round. I know a person with 0 referee reports. So sometimes, most of the times, it's desk rejection because the editor looked at your paper and said that's not really a good fit for us. Sometimes it's desk acceptance. That happened to me, very rare. So quantity is fine. What about the quality? So you have, say, somebody very good like John. Do you send all the papers to John to referee? even if John likes you very much and he will accept all these papers for referee, the quality of his referee reports will go down. So you will not send all your papers to John.
John will say no.
At some point, John will say no as well. So you might keep your good referees for some papers, and you might use the bad referees, like your own PhD students, for other papers. Right? So who will get good referees? Who will get bad referees? Let's say you're an editor. You've got this paper. You know where's the threshold. You know you will accept the paper if it's good enough. When will you use a bad referee? When will you use a good referee? The paper is clearly crap, right? You might desk reject it. Or you might send it to bad referee. The bad referee will say something bad about it, and you will send it back to the author saying, well, you know, I cannot do anything. I'm completely powerless over my journal if I only was an editor of that journal. But yeah. When are you going to use a good referee? When you want informative signal, right? When you're not sure, it kind of on the brink, but you want to make a one-side decision or another side decision. I'm ignoring here the advice you get from the referee. So there is these referee reports that also come to you. Do you want to incorporate the suggestions of referees in your paper? You might get these referees again in the next journal. In which case they will not stop at, you know, pointing out that they gave you 16 suggestions and you incorporated only 15, so not a good thing. I had referee reports that said that acknowledged that they refereed my paper before and I incorporated all their suggestions, so my paper must be accepted. I had referee reports where they said that he agreed to everything except this one little thing, and he must do that one little thing that I told him to do. So, yeah, I did that. Then I did. Essentially, it was something like that. So, I'm making a claim, an assumption. The person says, no, the assumption must be completely opposite. I'm saying no because I have a bunch of literature in front of that says no, my assumption is correct. I'm not writing that back to him, but yeah. He writes me back again saying, you must do the opposite assumption. I'm making a footnote. I'm saying some people say that the assumption must be opposite. Thank you, anonymous referee, for this suggestion. That's my five revise and resubmit paper kind of thing. I have a paper which has 5 rounds of revise and resubmit. Right now it's probably gonna get a 6th one, but yeah. So that's about 1.5 years since the first revise and resubmit. So I'm very quick in responding. How much time do you spend between sending the report back? What will happen to you as a referee if you will be known as a guy who replies in the first day after you get a request for revision? What will the editors think about you? They might think you're stupid, right? Right? No, because like he couldn't make a smart thing in that quickly. They might think you are very efficient, which might be even worse, because you will get much more referee reports to write and about much more varied area of questions, right?
Stupid and efficient.
Exactly.
You are the ultimate referee. They want you badly.
No, I mean, you kind of want to reply back because you know these authors are probably your colleagues like you are, and you know it takes some time before reports get back to the editor, and takes some time before the editor looks at them and makes a decision. And this publication cycle in economics is pretty long. So let's say in United States the tenure clock between hiring you and might be giving you tenure is from 9 years in more prominent departments in Stanford.
Yeah, 6 to 7. Only like
In worse places it can get.
8 or 9 departments can do 10.
In worse departments it can go to like 3 or 4 because they really want you to kick you out and hire somebody young instead of you. So yeah, my point is As an author, you suffer from the publication lag. As a referee, you know that authors suffer from the publication lag. So you kind of want to do a good thing and referee faster. But even ignoring your current teaching load, even ignoring your other obligations, even ignoring everything else, you don't really want to reply too quickly.
And can I ask a question from
Sure.
the previous discussion? I'm just really interested. If you get such a comment about some opposite assumption, something
Right.
controversial, do you try to explain your point of view as detailed as it is possible in order to come to some general common sense, or what do you do in your practice?
I try to make it visible that I consider these options and there are reasons why I don't want. Let me give you a completely like a step away from assumptions and into the literature reviews. Sometimes referees tell you cite this. That's amazing. I had 4 papers which were similar only in one co-author. So blind this, blind that, blind that, and the topics are not that close, to my or to each other. So I made a footnote saying see also, because that's what the guy wanted. I mean, he didn't really, So does it hurt me? Well, this specific thing, I don't think it did, because everybody understands that the referee wanted me. If I wrote like 5 more pages explaining how valuable are these papers, I could be taken as an idiot, because I'm, explaining papers which are not relevant to my whole paper. So I'm making the paper harder to read. So my paper would become worse. The way I handled that, it didn't become worse. And in that specific assumption that I mentioned, I made the case of saying, here's my result. You can do an opposite assumption. There will be a different result. I think my result corresponds better to the real data. So that's why I don't think this alternative assumption is that much better. But yeah, you can deal with the opposite assumption. Yes?
Yes. For instance, the Journal of Law and Economics, JDO as well, they ask you for preferred referees,
Right.
not preferred referees.
Right.
Some strategies that you would suggest here? I mean, put as many as possible, put as the lowest number, put some
I think
because also if you suggest somebody is negative,
Right.
you're given a signal.
Right.
So I like you and I don't like John, so probably they say, well, there will be some pitfalls here that John will not like me.
I suspect that people whom you know are probably not your enemies. Your enemies are people who you don't know, because they are fighting for the turf for their friends.
Yeah, okay.
Right? So listing everybody whom you don't know is kind of hard. There's like about 30,000 economists research active in the world, and it's going to take some time.
So therefore...
I never found, like I couldn't say, don't put my referee from another journal from 2 years ago. That would not work. I would need a specific name, right? As for preferred guys, I've put my advisor a couple of times. I've put Martin Janssen a couple of times. I don't think they were ever contacted. So I don't know if it's intentional or they,
But-
don't tell me that they were
But
contacted.
again, is this a signaling? Is this a signaling? If I put...
It could be.
Darren
There's-
Nasimoglu as my referee to say, well, this guy does not fear to go high. Of course,
No,
they're
no,
not.
no, it's not the reason.
So I'm exaggerating,
Yeah,
of
yeah.
course. So, but what?
This is an awesome empirical question. If I were an editor of a journal, I would run so many regressions about that. Unfortunately, as not a referee of the journal, these guys are not interested in making public what and where and when they were rejected. These guys are not interested to put in public who and where and when were rejected. And these guys are not interested to put in public their referee reports. Okay? I promise you that 99% of the referee reports, if you come to their authors and say, can I publish that with your name on it? They will say no, right? The whole referee report issue thing works because they are anonymous. You don't know who these people are. Okay?
If one has relies on resubmit,
Right.
does this guy get the same editors for next round?
Depends upon the editor. The editor might die, the editor might retire, the editor might stop being an editor. My revise and resubmit took a year and a half. The guy stopped being an editor, but he still gets me to deal with me. So, any other experiences?
Sometimes you get cycles. So you get a revise submit,
Right,
you adjust stuff,
right.
but then you send it back, but then the editor has changed.
Okay, so you had a change.
You ask you to do all the stuff you actually changed.
Right. No, that happened to me. That happened to me. Yep.
So we send to
Yeah, that's it. Come on, what do you want, right? And the editor doesn't decide it, and so you have to keep cycling around. And it's like, wow.
I had a paper which was which had two referees. One referee said that, you know, it's hard to read, it's bad English, I don't understand anything. And the other said that the English is perfect, I understood everything, but it's too easy. So, I mean, and the editor looks at that and he's like, I'm not sure which of these reasons is the reason for rejection, but there's definitely a rejection, so I'm not going to read anything. So, yeah. Again, referees decide how much time to spend, right? The editor cannot really influence them too much. Editor cannot come over to their houses and, you know, burn them down for, you know, responding too slowly. I have a friend who had a referee report from European Economic Review 2 years after submission. And he actually wrote a postcard to the editor of the Economic Review saying like, I have an anniversary today, you know, 2 years since the last time I heard from you. So he got accepted. I think the guy got, you know, shamed by the
Basic sense of humor.
Exactly. I have a friend who got, so economic letters is pretty fast. The papers there are about 2 pages, so it's quite quick to read them. So I have a colleague who got 1 year long desk reject. So he sent the paper to economic letters. In a year, the editor said, you know, I had this, you know, piece of paper that was, you know, my chair was wobbly. I put your paper under it, and now I found it, and I desk rejected. That's frustrating, like at the least. So editors, that arrow takes some time as well, right? And there is again the question of, you can have a good match of referee to the subject. You can get a referee that understands what you're talking about, or you can send it to a random person. Or at least a person that you don't know and you would just want to see how responsible he is or not. So do you search for an adequate referee, or do you dump that on a random person? Again, there are time costs of searching, there are resource costs of, you know, using up all your theory friends on papers, and then you get a really good theory paper and you don't have anybody to whom you can approach and ask for refereeing. Plenty of theoretical considerations, plenty of theoretical papers. It would be awesome to have empirical evidence upon all of that stuff, and people play with that. This decision, right? Think about a good question. How do you decide how much time to spend? There is a paper about it. There is a journal of public economics where 4 editors, I think Raj Chetty and his friends, had an experiment where they were sending papers randomly to referees with 4 random requests. One was as usual, one was please finish in 6 weeks, one was please finish in 4 weeks, and one was please finish in 4 weeks, then you get some money. So those whom they asked to finish in 6 weeks finished in weeks 5 to 6. Those whom they asked to finish in 4 weeks finished in weeks 3 to 4. The acceptance rejection decisions were pretty much the same, so they were not sending about the same paper with the same letter. So a letter from the referee with 6 weeks was equally acceptive in probability than the paper with 4 weeks. So people pretty much read the paper in equal, you know, attitude. And there were more rejections of requests for refereeing from people who were offered money. So if you come to a referee and you say, have some money, the guy's like, I'm offended by that, and I'm not.
I always refuse them.
Yeah, money, bad. If I had money, I would go to investment bank. I'm in here to not have any money.
$10 or $10. It's ridiculous. Just to change anything.
Changes.
Journal of Financial Economics gives, I think, $600 if you finish in a month. That's the most in the near economics professions. Yeah. Fly to United States. Plenty of opportunities for empirical papers, plenty of opportunities for theoretical papers, if people reply to you with the questions, or if you're an editor, or if your advisor is an editor. Yeah.
Some journals also have the competition, the best reviewer.
Yeah.
Top journals, like ER, I think it's.
Sure. I'm not sure if it counts for anything in promotions or confirmations or grants or
Makes your
whatever.
target.
Yeah. So I'm not sure who are these people who are looking for these awards, who strive for these awards.
Actually, that's a good scholarly quality.
Yes. But
There's a signal.
absolutely, it's very good. The problem is that you're advertising everybody, please make me a reviewer. Most people are good reviewers, are trying to avoid more requests.
You win and then you are stuck forever.
But then you can choose.
Anyway, that's another.
Look at the width of this arrow. I spent effort at making this arrow as slim as possible while still being visible. Okay? So the proportion in here is pretty much equal to proportion in here. Okay? This is much smaller. Publishing is hard. That's why it's valuable. As every resource, scarcity gives its value. So we used to be publishing because we were disseminating our research. So there were examples where a person writes a paper, publishes that. Another person in the opposite side of the United States writes the same paper, publishes that. And then you have things like Kruger-Talak controversy or Chilichinsky-Wooders problems in 1990. Yeah. So Gordon Talak published a paper in something like Southern Economic Journal about rent seeking, and nobody read it. And then Anne Kruger published a little bit different paper. That's where she actually called it rent seeking, as far as I remember. So she put a name on that. But she published in AR.
It was Western Economic Review.
Right.
Without inquiry.
Right. So yeah, she got much more citations than people found the paper by Talak. Now people cite both of these papers, but Kruger's paper came out 5 years later. So we used to have these journals. We strive to publish in journals with bigger circulation because that's how you get your paper to other people, and that's how people know that you have done something and they can reflect upon that. Now we have internet. We have Google Scholar. You put words and the list of papers, working papers, and little scratchings and conference proceedings and whatnot appear there immediately. If you are not sure what the paper is about, you write to the author and the author replies to you in 20 minutes because authors really like citations, right? So sometimes people ask me how to get papers if your library is not subscribed to a certain journal. You write to the author. Nobody in my experience have rejected my request for a copy of their paper. And I mean like papers from 1980s, people keep those. People reply in like 20 minutes with a PDF like conveniently formatted. So I guess my point is we don't really need journals to circulate ideas. We need journals because we have university administrators. University administrators cannot read papers. They can count. They can count working papers, but I can write a program that will write me working papers for me. And they wouldn't be too different from, from the perspective of the administrator, from reasonable research. Administrators know that journals are selective. So published papers are different from not published papers. That's why you get promoted if you publish more. That's why you get hired if you publish more. That's why you get grants if you publish more. Actually, if you apply for a grant, they ask you to submit the list of publications. They would not care about your working papers. It can be a fantastic working paper. It can be very relevant working paper. They will not care about that. However, if you have a publication in AR, it's a theoretical publication in AR about auction theory, and you apply for a grant about, you know, the history of France, and you put your AR in your list of relevant publications, they would be very happy about that. So this guy can publish in AR. That's the only thing they read from there. They don't care about the field or anything. So we use publications to signal our value. Editors, what do they care about? Well, some editors care about the profession. Other editors are hired for a job, they're doing the job, so they want their journals to be more prominent, they want publications in their journals to be more valuable, so they try to publish better paper and they try to not publish crappy paper. It's a scarce resource, publications in journals. There's so much economics. As soon as you get a scarce resource, you can have so much economics about all sorts of aspects. So you got an idea. Do you want to develop it? Right? Economics. You have time, right? You allocate your time between ideas. You get an idea which is not similar to your other ideas. Should you work on that? In the profession, you might get punished for having two different ideas. They might come to you and say, well, you don't know what you're talking about. You need to develop a coherent research agenda. How come you don't have a research agenda? All right? You might have a very good idea which is not looking like your current pipeline. And it might be optimal for you to hide that idea. This is what's happening to me now. I was just denied confirmation in Belfast because I don't have a coherent research agenda. Next year, they gave me a chance to reevaluate my research agenda to make it more coherent. I have to delete some of my publications or something. I don't know how. You know. So yeah, you have a bad idea, but it's about a hot topic, right? You have a new editor in AR who likes experimental stuff. You came up with a crappy experiment, and you have money. You have a chance to publish it in AR because you know a guy who publishes every experiment in AR. Yes?
About the agenda.
Right.
Isn't it a question of framing? For instance, what is the name of this guy?
Right.
I mean, his agenda is quite wide, but I can say, well, I study puzzles. Or I do field experiments.
Paul Samuelson.
That is my agenda.
Paul Samuelson, when he was asked about his field, because MIT wanted to have a website and they wanted to have the list of people and their fields. So everybody got a letter that says, like, you must come up with your field or, you know, get fired or whatever. He wrote back saying, I'm an economist. That's
rephrasing my question. Those who are of us who are still in the pursuing of it, should we go narrow in that agenda, or
I know you can get
rephrase?
I know you can get punished if you don't rephrase it well enough on the job market, in particular, in publications. If you have publications, nobody cares. But if you don't have publications and you don't have a research agenda, you're completely screwed.
Publications that look like
right. But you can frame it as if they're
It's not shooting there and just shooting birds.
Yeah.
I can say, as having been on tenure committees for 20 years, that the optimal strategy at most departments is high-low. What's high-low? You always have one major agenda you can justify as your agenda.
Which is a mainstream.
Doesn't matter, but whatever, that's where you're going to risk. And then you have other papers as interest. But if it is not possible to look at your vita and extract a main agenda, then there's a whole bunch of departments that will not take you unless you have huge numbers of papers. So, for example, even like Levin, I guarantee you that if he weren't so successful, no, in fact, even given his Levin, there were top departments that would hire him if they liked his agenda. There were top departments. At the time, Levitt was successful, who were saying that Levitt is just a poser and he's just doing a bunch of random Reader's Digest things. That was the term people used. Believe me, at every level, this issue comes up. And I can tell you that at the top 50 department, it's extremely important to have an agenda. That is to sort of say, the top 50 department, if your papers are random, even if they're above the level of quality, you will be rejected.
Yeah.
Guys, I have
My
20
question is-
20 more
my
slides
question is,
and
you
20
have
more.
an agenda, but that agenda should be a mainstream agenda, a jail code, or you make your agenda.
Yeah, that's how risk averse you are, right? So for instance, when Bernard Smith was first doing experimental work, you have to look at Bernard Smith was a very successful guy in grad school. He won the award at Harvard for a dissertation, a best dissertation. He was doing financial economics. He switched to this idea of experimental. Everybody thought it was insane. When he first gave an early paper, both Harvard and Chicago hated him. So he decided he would take risks and be at lower ranked universities. Right? He was at Purdue and UMass and so forth. And then, so he gambled and then did very well. It's a risk-reward trade. Okay? If you gamble against street, you're more likely to get good publications. If you gamble on a big thing, then you have to accept that you will be at a lower ranked department, potentially.
Point being, pursuing good ideas might not be an optimal strategy.
That's right. That's just the reality.
But you also have to live with yourself.
That's right.
I like what you do.
Exactly.
The only reason to do it is
Short
not-
story about Levitt. He was a keynote speaker in a couple of years ago. I don't remember which conference was that, but his story was that he had a father who was a doctoral student and like medical student, and he was the worst of his cohort, and his friends was laughing at him and saying that you should be a proctologist. And his father thought that why not? And he became a proctologist, and he became the best proctologist because nobody wants to become a proctologist. So, and that turns out to be one of them areas where people are eager to pay a lot of money so that you solve their problems. So he turned out to be very successful because he was doing stuff that other people were not touching. Levitt finished with, that's what I'm doing in economics. So
And
other people have,
when my department the first time it's long ago asked me to say my fields, I had to fill in, I put it strawberry fields.
Right.
Then they got very angry. So I didn't want to say, you know, I do that I want to. That's not acceptable.
yeah, that's coming back to administrators. They realize they want fields. You cannot stop them.
Yeah, no, but then there is a question. You mentioned even people who are above average in the publishing, still it is not acceptable if they are too diverse in their papers. What do you think is the reason behind it? I will think about quality, that people are, that the administrators worry about the quality of papers if they are too diversified in the field.
No. They're not interested in quality of papers. The reason is a good department is interested in quality of department. And they want to signal is that you will be an intellectual leader. It's very important. It's not just somebody who is doing the minimum paper quality that luckily gets, think about it this way, there's a lemons problem, right? They know journals have some variance in acceptance. And if you just use it, this is why the US top departments, top 50, do not blindly use a formula for promotion. Because if you use a promotion model, then you have the potential problem that the worst person who got lucky and got 2 publications would be tenured in the department. And that's a big, and they're also aware that certain people, like say Coase, made enormous contributions with only a few papers. And the higher the department is, the more they want Coase and North and Stiglitz and Samuelson, and not the guy who has 50 papers that no one has read. That's the risk. In contrast, lower level, the lower the department is, the more they want to say their top school, and the way they prove it is say, look at our guys with top publications. Okay? When I was at WashU, we would routinely get somebody applying for, say, associate professor job, junior, who had a huge number of publications from good departments. I would show them the senior guy, and he'd go, oh, we know about this guy, we don't want him. You don't even look at him.
So what John is telling you now is like 5 empirical papers in there. If you can get data about who is looking for a job, you can, for instance, check whether having a field is important. Right? Immediately.
You see papers everywhere.
That's what I want you to learn. See papers everywhere. Here's the story, right? How to check that? Well, you have a job market. You have a job rumors, right? In job rumors, there is a list of everybody who is looking for a job in this university, right? You don't see the quality of the talk. Fine, it's epsilon. As in, you know, in your regression, it's epsilon, right? You know the CVs of those who apply. You can extract the information about their publications. Do people hire the best published person? The answer is no. You know the answer. Now it's time for you to get the regression and, you know, see how it works.
You can look at it more specifically. You can go to the top 20 departments, and if you look at the data, you say, who got tenured with the minimal publications? Look at only people with, say, less than 8 publications at the time they got tenured.
How to judge about the fields? Go to Mariana and ask him how to calculate the amount of topics in a text. You have papers, you calculate the concentration of the author in, you know, gel codes or whatever, right?
Well, the number of topics is the other way around. In the topic analysis, you have to give how many topics you can cover.
I mean, one thing you can do is you can take gel, for instance, and get the gel codes out of the papers and say whether the guy is publishing in the same gel codes, right? So yeah, how big should be the journal? If the journal is too big, nobody's going to read that. That's not a problem now because nobody's reading the journals, right? But if you have a too big a journal, you would have a lot of submissions. If you have a lot of submissions, you would need a lot of editors. You have a lot of editors, you get a bad match of papers to editors. You get crappy papers getting in, right? You cannot make too big of a journal. Should it be general interest or should be that a field journal? If it's a field journal, well, you know you're going to get field submissions or they're going to be immediately rejected, right? But not a lot of people will, of high ability, with very good papers, will submit their papers to a field journal. Why? They can publish in AR. They can publish in a general interest journal. So you can get some of the better papers by being a second-tier general interest journal. Journal of Mathematical Economics wrote back to one of my papers saying, we are a general interest journal. No, you're not. You're Journal of Mathematical Economics. It says so in the title. You're not a general interest journal. But yeah, everybody strives to be a general interest journal. It seems so. Yeah, do you want to invite papers? You know Darren Asimoglu is a smart guy. You know he has a working paper. Why don't you just come to him and say, let me publish your working paper? What incentives does that create? Some journals are 100% invited papers journals. Journals of Economic Perspective, for instance. Right? It's a very good journal, counts for confirmations and promotions and everything. Do you charge fees? European Economic Review charges 200 euros for submission. Right? IR used to charge $80. I'm not sure if it still does. QG charges nothing. Right? QG is better than European Economic Review. How come European Economic Review charges money? Right?
GIA also is free.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
it's a reaction to the European Economic Review.
Sure.
So the European Economic Review used to be the journal of the European Economic Association.
Right.
It was taken over by Elsevier. Elsevier started to charge big money.
Right.
And the reaction was that the association founded a new journal.
Right.
The GIA managing it itself and still for free. And
Right.
it's compete, and GIA is actually better.
Right.
So this fight about charging fees and
But then you can charge fees, and it's costly for people like Russians whose income is not that high. Or you can charge time costs, right? There is a trade-off. You can charge bigger fees, like finance journals, like Journal of Financial Economics that I mentioned before. They charge like, I don't know, $1,000 for submission. But they pay their referees $600 for quicker rewrite, for quicker rounds. Does it make sense to pay the referees?
Well, it's also a selection.
Papers. There are papers about that.
Yeah, but it's a selection device, the fee. You
Sure.
pay twice before sending to JFE.
No, finance people just charge to the university and they don't care.
Well, sure, but you have a limited amount of resources.
Or maybe you get less submissions if you charge money, right?
Yes, and that's...
If you have a crappy paper, you're not
Yeah,
submitting,
that's
you're not paying
from
$1,000,
editorial point of view,
right?
you have just only
Right.
those
or
who are local selected.
you will get no papers from poor universities or universities in poor countries.
As an editor, do you care?
Yes, I do.
It depends.
Because I want to minimize the work.
Well, you have this utility function. There is a feasible set. I know you won't, be richer and be healthier, but you have these limitations. So, can you sacrifice the poor universities for the greater good of better publications? Sure. Right? Some papers are 100%. So there are papers about publishing, and the ones I cut out were pretty much about how publications work out empirically. So this is a paper from 2002 that was one of the first studies where the person was prominent enough to get very precise data from Econometric Review of Economic Studies about the time between submission and acceptance in month. In 1970s, right, it was a year between you submitted and it accepted. If it gets accepted, it might not get accepted, right? But even if it gets accepted, there is a year between submission and acceptance. Now, it's 5 years. Okay? The reason why the best universities now say my tenure clock can be 9 years is precisely because of that.
And this doesn't take into account the time when you started.
Sure, when you start writing.
Yes.
And if you have an empirical paper, that can be another 5 years of writing.
It takes you sometimes.
Exactly. And that's why you don't make mistakes. If you make a mistake, you redo everything from scratch. So there is this Larry Page guy of Google who, when he was confronted with Google remembering everything, and if a person makes a mistake, Google will remember that forever. He said, well, don't make mistakes then. I never made a mistake, so how come you do it all the time? So yeah, it's hard to publish a paper in top 5. Purely in time terms. It's 4 years. Okay? Even if you have an idea good enough, even if you write the paper right, even if you get the right referees, on average you spend like 4 years, and that's acceptance, that's not coming out. Nobody cares about whether your paper came out or not. If it is accepted, that's as good enough as if it was already in paper. Yeah.
Also, anecdotal evidence from the law and economics field. Law journals accept multiple submissions
Right.
at the same time.
Right.
Because they are edited by JD students, their turnover and they're competing for the paper
Right.
is much lower.
Right.
So if you want to get published earlier.
What's the problem with that in economics? These guys are very expensive. And if you make the work for nothing, right, they will be really pissed off and they will not accept refereeing work suggestions as easily. So if you make editors compete, it will be harder to get adequate referees. In law, these are students, and you know the quality of refereeing of students.
We are talking about the JD students from Harvard.
Sure.
I then got to presidency.
Point being, we don't do that. Don't submit your paper to two journals simultaneously. You will be punished till forever.
How you can know?
First submission. It used to be 3 months in 1970. It's 6 months now, on average. You can get a year, you can get 2 years until the first reply. Okay? Takes a lot of time, takes a lot of rounds between submission and acceptance. So, yeah, this is the same, this is QGE. Number of revisions went to 0.6 into 2.0. You're almost guaranteed to have a revise and resubmit. It could be, it's the best of your outcomes that you get a revise and resubmit. It's likely to be the best possible outcome. Number of revisions, in total, number of revisions before acceptance is pretty much the same. So there is a little bit less in 1980, right? You're more likely to get accepted without revise and resubmit before. Now, whether you get accepted or you don't get accepted, you get pretty much the same amount of revisions.
It's 97 still. It's not
This is 1997, now it's even worse, yeah. Author time for the first pre-accept revision. So how much time authors deal with referee reports. 4.7 months. So you spend about, what was that, half a year waiting for a reply, and you deal for half a year with your own reply to that. And you have to realize this is QGE. If you get a revise and resubmit in QGE, you drop everything else. And you just work at referee reports because you really want that publication. Fields. Urban is a bit faster. Econometrics is a bit longer. You don't get a lot of mileage from assuming that it's coming from different fields. So yeah, since 1970s, papers became longer, so the delay went up considerably. The most of the increase in the delay because there is now more people submitting papers. So there is more work for the referees, so there is longer time for the referees. If we want to do something with the publication process, we might want to cut on submitting. If you know all the Harvard people were like, we published enough already, let us stop publishing for a second. It would be faster. We don't need, competition of editors or anything. Just the amount of work that drives the increase significantly. So that was 2002, this is 2014. Pretty much the same sample, top fives. They're looking at the difference from 1960 to 2010. They found that there's now 2 times more submissions. The number of published articles went down, which if you think about that, is the opposite of the technical revolution, right? So now you have computers, now printing is cheaper, shipping is cheaper, editing is cheaper, everything is cheaper, right? You should have more papers regurgitated with doubling the submissions, right? Well, unless everybody started to do a bad job, right? Which is unlikely with the increase in competition.
Yeah,
the number of articles should have increased. No, that's top 5.
Yes, but
there are more journals. But why would you, as a top 5 editor?
Accept papers overall.
Right, I understand. My point is, you have an AR as a journal, an editor. You decide about how many articles to publish.
Yeah.
You publish less now.
It's
Even though.
Contents will accept fewer students, that's one way.
Yes, I mean, it's like you want to be the Ducati politician. You don't want to sell more motorbikes. Just only one.
My point is, it became harder because there is more competition, and it became harder because there is less papers getting accepted. Okay? AR now became bigger. It used to be pretty much equal areas. Now the AR is still about 40%. Yes?
You mentioned the citation average as 200, but what is really cool is the median ranks. That's a lot.
Sure.
Because there's a few guys massively.
5,000 over a year. Yeah.
And most of them have zero.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So there's many papers in good journals never cite
Sure.
anything.
I think these guys are from Berkeley, right?
Yep.
Yeah, I saw the working paper. What I found that fascinating is the number of co-authors.
Yeah.
So this on average, and where previously you would have one Williams on one code, now you have
No,
six.
I'll show about the
And
number.
the idea is that we all like co-author with each other. You have one working course and the other free writing on that paper, but on
If you look at submissions by Chinese authors, there's like 6, 7, 8 co-authors in the same paper. And the funny, what would be interesting for me is to look at the number of authors after the revision. So if you got the revise and resubmit in a year, you know that in many universities you get a lot of money for that. If you are a co-author of such a paper. I wonder if the number of co-authors increases.
You piggyback on
Yes.
No, there should be like a market or an auction or something, I don't know, for efficiency reasons. But yeah.
But what's the share of people who actually publish it from 5,000 people? I mean,
Not in this journal.
most of
No,
the people
not on
are,
this
like,
paper.
Super famous anyway, so if they do this,
Well, you have different fights, right? Right? When you're a graduate student, you want a job. When you have a job, you want to get tenure. When you got tenure, you want a promotion. You want a grant. When you are head of the department, you want better PhD students because you don't want to make your lecturers do the discussion sessions. You want to get PhD students to do the... Exactly. Some people just, wait. They like glory.
Glory.
So have about 25 more slides and about 5 minutes.
Sorry.
But have you heard the stories from these guys? Each of them is a separate paper, not written. Okay? And they are not using some metrics that are not infeasible. You can see the citations of the papers. There are robots that do that for you. Right? You have information about individual authors. You can calculate the metrics of ability out of publicly available information. Fields, Hammermesh looked at co-authors. That's actually a little bit more illuminating. So it's not just, you went from having 2 co-authors to 3 co-authors. The probability of having more than 1 co-author increased from 1963 to 2011. If you have 2, the probability of having 3 increased. If you have 3, the probability of having 4 increased. Right? So you are more likely to have more co-authors in any possible relationship. And there are actually, now there are papers with 5 co-authors. There used to be 0 papers with 5 co-authors until 2003. Okay? Now you have 5 co-authors papers. However, most of the people publish nothing. It's hard to publish. In Harvard, if you're a median person, your publication record 6 years after your graduation, if you found the job, is 0.04 AR equivalents.
If you get the degree from Harvard.
If you get a degree from Harvard and you are a median publishing person from Harvard. What's the AR equivalent in their definition? Economic letters is 0.2 AR equivalents. 0.04 is much worse than economic letters. Even if you are a median person from Harvard, it's incredibly hard for you to publish. If you are from UCLA, you publish nothing. Okay? If you are a median person from UCLA, you publish nothing after you graduated and you found a job.
Please clarify this, and in our time, how is
This is data from 1985 to 2006.
If you compare to our time, in Russia, for example, in order to stay in the job,
Right.
we have those contracts for a couple of years, and then a new contract, hopefully. But to have a new contract, you have some publications to be done. It doesn't mean that it's the best publications, but at least something. And in USA,
No, these people aren't getting academic jobs or getting fired.
These are not Russian people. These
I
are,
understand, but
yeah.
please clarify about the American system. How does
No.
it work?
Look, these are all PhD
All
students. So some of them
Got a
are
job.
not going to academia. Some
No. These are people with jobs.
Someone will get fired after 6 years with 0
The
publications.
same as in Russia.
Huh?
Yeah.
Same system as in Russia, yes.
I mean, some of them might need 7 years, but I don't think they would.
This is selection, right? This is
Yeah.
guys.
And it's much stricter than Russia because you can be a teacher for a long time and be an assistant professor. In America, it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
It's not like Europe. You can be a lecturer in Europe forever. By law, you cannot be a lecturer in the same university forever.
They have a formula, but economic letters is 0.2 AR equivalent, just for a scale. So yeah, if you go to Harvard, you might not publish ever. Okay, it's not like they give you a free QGE if you go to Harvard. Some of them might have a free QGE if you go to Harvard.
But can I explain something
Sure.
also that's important? What you don't realize also is there's a gaming issue with respect to publication. How you arrange here's the simple way to do it. The higher the level the university you are, the less total publication counts and more quality. So publishing in a bad journal actually hurts your chance to get tenure.
So
And
they
then,
don't go for it.
On the
Yeah.
other hand, the lower level department, you go, the more numbers count. So the problem is, imagine that you're a graduate of Berkeley, and your first job is Wisconsin. Then you have to decide, and you're trying to publish an AAR. But AAR rejection, QJE rejection, JP rejection. Should you keep trying? But if you keep trying for top journals, and you get nothing, Wisconsin will fire you, but then a lower level department cannot hire you also because you have 0 publications.
Right.
Writing down impact growth.
So
Example.
what you often do is you diversify. So you say, I recommend to most people you have 1 article you're promoting at the top journal if you have to publish. Then you have 2 or 3 you're publishing right away in field journals.
Example,
understand?
Sergey Popov got a job in MIT after Penn State. He got no publications while he was in MIT for 6 years. He found a job in New Economic School. He published like 5 or 6 papers in the next couple of years. Why? Because he was sending stuff to Econometrica, he got rejected. He wrote up new stuff, sent it to Econometrica, got rejected. In 6 years, he got a bunch of stuff ready for submission into AEJ, to Theoretical Economics, into other journals. New Economic School was happy enough to have him. Yeah?
Yeah, but isn't it like he published it right before going to NAS?
Well, it's not like he just needed to push a button and get accepted. He just had a bunch of papers that would not count for MIT.
No, but there were stories. I have a colleague, I'm not going to mention his name, but he was at George Mason. He was a Harvard PhD. He had one good publication in the Journal of Economic Growth. It didn't get in. So he got denied tenure. And then he worked for a while and he got nothing for about 3 years. Suddenly, he got an Econometrica, Journal of Economic Growth, Journal of Law Economics, and AJPS. So top, like 1 or 2 top 3 econ, 1 top 3 political science. He's been out for 11 years. He sent in 100 applications last year. He got no offers.
I have about 2 more minutes to finish. I have a bunch of papers in there on the slides. This is the paper that I wrote with a former classmate of mine from Illinois, Sasha Bagistanyan. So we took top 100 people in the profession by the RIPIC ranking in 6 different fields, right? So lifetime top 100 people. Arguably, they had ideas before they started their PhD, right? Arguably, these were good ideas because they could have a great career out of these ideas, right? So ideas is not something that your advisor gives to you, right? You have to have your own ideas because the advisor doesn't have a lot of good ideas. He has his own ideas and he needs to sell them, right? There is one exclusion, Peter PCB Phillips, okay? He has enough ideas, he has a drawer with ideas, right? And he gives them to you. Nobody else in the profession. So, let's take these 100 people. Let's take their first 10 publications, right? So the time of their first publication, the only thing known about this person outside of his department is where he came from and maybe his first job, right? So his advisor is pretty much where he came from, right? You have an editor over here who gets a paper, a signal about the alma mater, and a signal about the first job. If this is about only the paper's qualities, the chance of getting an AER for people from different alma maters, for these geniuses people, right? For these guys, the probability should be the same. Turns out they're not. Your alma mater matters. You learn a little bit and you increase the chance of getting an AER in some fields with your 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th, and so on papers. But your alma mater, if your rank goes up, as in you go from being in Harvard to being in a top 100 place, goes worse, 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 worse. So how to quantify that? Well, if you graduate from rating 1, you get an AR with probability 33%. If the same person graduates from top 100, it's 12%. On average, it's 6%. So going to a top 100 still might make sense if you're a genius. Okay? Being a genius might make sense. So if you choose between, being a genius and not being a genius.
Do you interpret this as a selection bias by editors based on the rank of the evaluation?
We are trying to sell that as that, yes. So I don't know whether it's conscious or subconscious or whatnot, but it seems clear that even people with credibly good ideas have a hard time publishing these good ideas.
But there could also be network effects.
Absolutely.
You know better what is desirable. So
Still, it's a bad thing.
Right, I understand.
Yeah.
But just so people understand the mechanism, it's not like...
No, it could be that the guy doesn't think that he can publish in ER and he doesn't send it to ER, right? But it's still a bad thing.
Right, I
right?
understand. But that's why they need to understand.
It doesn't have to be editor's problem.
Yeah. So it's actually not our problem.
It's the profession problem. It's the profession problem. Exactly.
That's what-
So there are people with top 100. So there is John Liston there who graduated from University of Western Ontario or something.
No. Wyoming.
Whatever. It's not.
Yeah, it's very close.
Yeah. So there are other people who are not from Harvard. I think the top 5 is about 40% of these authors. So it's surprising how few of them are actually graduating from Harvard and coming back to Harvard. Yeah, there are a bunch of papers, turns out, about the editor's motivation. Turns out that editors get cited more as soon as they become editors. So, yeah, if you become an editor, your colleagues from your department publish much more frequently in your journal, but the average quality of their publication is the same as the average quality measured by citations of other papers. So, on average, they don't hurt, but then you think about what about the best of these papers, what about the worst of these papers, how about we look at the tails, and this paper is a little bit silent about that. Other people tried doing the same thing with the average publications and they didn't find anything. I ran out of time. My point here was that here is a little not that important fundamentally thing. You can publish a bunch of papers about this thing if you find a good story. And you talk to people, and you practice yourself, and you collect your own experience, and you can come up with papers from that. And you learn to collect information from robots, from crawlers, from Google Scholar, and you can publish a paper using that. And all other fields are exactly the same. IO, history, labor, you name it. How you come up with ideas, come up with a story.
Also science.
Exactly.
Why you look at economics?
Exactly. No, if you want to do publications, sure. If you want to do publications.
Sergey, this is a bad, it's one bad thing is that people may take the wrong lesson from this. This is assuming your target is the very top econ journals. But in fact, you can do a lot of good work without being in the very good top econ journals. And the market for econ has grown tremendously. And for the average person, you're going to be choosing not between the top 10 departments, but when departments rank 40 and higher.
Right.
Are lower. And so what that means, that's a different story. So they're getting good publications. There's a different rule for different schools. And the idea is to understand the rule, to understand where you want to live, and to maximize your research strategy to increase the chance of getting a decent job in the place you want to live.
Let me conclude with showing that being the best from Harvard and being the best from NYU is not terribly different. And there is 15 more, and it's not terribly different as well. Thank you very much for listening.